You got me?
Yeah, you're good. How you doing, dude?
Doing good, doing good. Y'all got power back over there?
We got power back now. Yeah, it was crazy
Awesome.
the last couple of weeks, dude. It was rough.
Dang. How much snow did y'all get?
We did well. The snow we got was the kind of sleet that didn't stick, and
The
so
ice that brings down power lines.
ice that brings down power lines, ice that brings down the driveway you can't get out. It was rough, man.
Oh,
We were out of power maybe 3 days, something like that. And those 3 days was like you and then somebody else. And I was like, oh God, I got to message her back because it was crazy. So my apologies for
yeah.
being so late, and thanks for working with me.
Yeah, man, it's all good. I understand that. You can't help that.
So, dude, where are you located right now? Are you in Nashville now, or where you at?
No, I'm actually in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay, good old
Mhm.
was Darius Rucker from there?
Yeah.
Who else is from there, celebrity wise?
Darius, Darius Ruckers from here. A lot of them live here. I know that. Like
Yeah.
you got Danny McBride that's got a house down here. There's a bunch of actors. I think Sturgill Simpson just got a house down here. So there's a good many. But yeah, as far as being from here, I know Darius is the one.
And so, kind of, what's your day like on a normal day? Like, let's say you're not doing an interview, you're not writing songs. What's the day look like for you, Andrew?
I'm unlike a lot of musicians in the sense that I got to be real structured and try to. I mean, obviously this year's been a little bit different, but generally wake up pretty early in the morning and make a cup of coffee. Coffee's kind of my go-to, and grab a notepad and either start writing some ideas, write a song, listen to music in the morning. Generally work out, and then lately it's been doing a bunch of interviews and traveling all over the place and waiting on shows to come back. So during the week I do a lot of hunting and fishing whenever I get all the work done, and then on the weekends just want to hit a road again. So we got a 2 night run this weekend, so looking forward to that.
So, do you have a job other than music? Because obviously 2020 was not a good year. So how are you staying afloat financially?
Well, I was very fortunate that I worked for the state of South Carolina before I was full time musician, so you learn how to manage money real well when you don't make it. But
Right.
honestly, a lot of backyard parties just had to fly under the radar and make ends meet. I've worked on a couple of farms down here to you know kind of pass the time, and you do what you got to
odd
do to
odd
survive.
jobs in and out.
Right, but I mean, honestly, I was able to stick to. I got some great sponsors. Palmetto 4x4 is one of them down here in the Low Country, and I slipped in there a couple of days a week, answered phones, and it kind of helped a lot of music out as well too, because I don't know a whole lot about lift kits and tires as far as install, but I know about what you need to put on your truck and what's the best on the market. So I learned a lot doing that. And when I answer phone calls, people would be like, "Who is this?" I was like, "This is Andrew Bean." They're like, "Man, I've never met you before. I love your music." So I thought that was pretty cool, and it was a good sponsor association as well. But I got a lot of good people in our corner, and I thank everybody for that.
What's the oddest job? Because you said you've worked in and out. What's the oddest or the hardest job that you've ever had?
That I've ever had or during the shutdown.
That you've ever had?
Ever had. My least favorite one was probably, I think my first job was Subway back in the day. And I learned
Oh
real quick.
man.
I was like 14 back then. But I didn't want to, I learned real quick I did not want to do anything with food for sure. Uh, but other than that, I mean, I've always been a big proponent of do what you love to do so you don't feel like you're working a day in your life. So I worked, and basically, actually worked at a barbecue restaurant in high school, which was cool, and that was a little bit different than normal food jobs. And you smoke ribs and chicken and barbecue on Saturdays. It was only open Saturdays. The best high school job you asked for. And when I went into Clemson, I ended up getting an internship as a park ranger and went to do that full time. Got into law enforcement, was a game warden, and never thought I wanted to do music full time ever until enough people told me I needed to do that. And in May of 2018, music full time.
So you mentioned game warden. There's these shows that come on, like Animal Planet or something like that. Something about law enforcement, right? And I wonder,
Right.
are those? Have you ever seen some of those before? I asked this question.
Right.
Okay, so are those somewhat accurate? Although it's a reality show, are they still accurate as to what it depicts it to be?
The one I think that hits it on the head the best that I've seen is Lone Star Law. That's the
Long
Texas
Star. That's
game
that's what I'm
wardens.
talking about. That's what Law and Star Law. Yeah.
Yeah, Lone Star Law is good. I mean, it's pretty realistic in the sense that, you know, some of them, there's a Hollywood factor to every show, obviously.
Right.
But I think the Texas one does a real good job of every day. You know, most of what you deal with is license checks, or you checking somebody for fish. And I was down here on the coast, so they show a lot of coastal environments in that Texas show. So that was probably the one that was pretty accurate. And then, you know, there are times though that if you got a camera crew following you around, you're gonna find something interesting at some point. But it's not every day that you get in a high speed pursuit somewhere. But it's definitely a great job.
You know, I want to say that the Cops, the TV show Cops, I want to say that's a little bit fake, because it's like every time they stop this guy for a tag or he's speeding, didn't stop at a stop sign, they're finding drugs somewhere. So I'm thinking maybe it's a little bit of a put on. I mean, it's not every time you're going to stop,
well,
that, you know.
There is a big difference though between game wardens and street cops.
Right.
Yeah, game wardens, the way I've always explained it, that the street cops deal with good people at their worst, or any other law enforcement, really. And game wardens deal with potentially bad people at their best. So I had a guy that one time we locked up that had a warrant out for murder, but he was fishing his tail off on a dock. Not a care in the world, was happy as could be. And we walked up there, and yeah, everybody kind of knows game wardens and cowboys law enforcement. And we're pretty laid back for the most part. But we walked up there, and he got the fishing license. He's like, "No, sir." And they gave me his ID, and we came back, and things got real quick. But he was cool with us, didn't have any problem with him. But that's the difference, is a lot of street cops do deal with crazy stuff every day, because they're pulling more people over. They're looking for a lot different things than what a game warden is.
So my next question would be, when you come upon that guy and, you know, he had a felony and he was, you know, out for murder and stuff like that, do you guys have the right to arrest him, or do you have to call the police in at this point?
No, so game wardens have got more jurisdiction than anybody in law enforcement.
Really? Okay.
Just being the nature and what a game warden does, which again, I don't do that anymore. I left that job in 2018. But it's just, yeah, I pull people on the side of the road before for running a stop sign. You don't look for that stuff, but there's times you just got to do what you got to do. So game wardens are state law enforcement.
So if you're just on the highway as a you know, you can stop somebody even though they're on the highway.
Right. And my favorite one was littering. I can't stand anybody that litters. And people throw cigarette butts out the window all the time. And generally I was obviously hunting and fishing violations. So you don't want to get bogged down with pulling people over on the road. But I think what always irked me was if somebody flipped a cigarette butt out the window and it hit my truck, they were getting pulled over on the side of the road and get a talking to.
Wow.
But you saw everything, man. It really was a cool job. But it's just one of those things that the more people I pulled over, and I was playing for fun around here at that point in time, they said, "Man, you're that guy that plays country music." And I was like, "You're right." And they said, "Man, you got to, what are you doing this job? You need to get to Nashville. You need to take this thing to the top." And I think enough people said that, and it made my decision pretty easy to leave.
So people tell you that, what was the final draw where you're like, okay, that's it, I'm going to Nashville?
Well, actually, I've never been to Nashville, believe it or not.
Really? Okay.
So
I didn't know that.
That's one of the reasons I left. I'm based out of Charleston, so we're kind of doing it our own way. There was a combination of things, but number one was a schedule. So when you work for the state, you only get one weekend off a month. And obviously any event is going to happen in music on the weekends. So I think at the point in time that it was the money I was losing, the opportunities I was losing overcame the schedule, is when there was a definite merge and you had to pick and choose. There was a particular event that happened, I'll talk about in a bunch of interviews, but I played on the back of a sport fisher one night, and then it had a great time. It was people I didn't know, they now sponsor us and we're like family. But I had to come back a couple hours later and lock somebody up for felony DUI. And it happened across the slip from where we played. And so you can't make that up. But I remember standing there at 2:00 in the morning, looking to my left and then looking to my right. It was kind of my two paths in life that I could choose. And I definitely think we chose right. And it was also the fact that people were telling me, Nashville's kind of changed country music a good bit. The pendulum's definitely swinging. But I remember people were like, you can do this thing. Forget Nashville. Just stay true to your fan base and it'll spread. And so that's what we were doing. And it was working great. Still is. It's just, obviously everybody's in the same boat. That's one common denominator. This COVID thing is, and a lot of lines of work, but especially music, has put a pause button on a lot of things. They just lifted the crowd capacity and the closing time for bars today in South Carolina. So we got 2 o'clock closings now. So I just picked up 2 shows because of that.
What did it used to be? Midnight?
11.
11. So that means
First it was like, I think they stopped serving it.
Really?
Yeah, I think they stopped serving at 9 at first. So shows went from being 10:30 to 1 or 10:30 to 1:30 to 6 to 9. And even with it's a different vibe at any venue when you play like that. So basically, when you're ending a show under the restrictions is when most of the time people are just getting into the music.
Right. And it's also because, like, if you're going to go to a bar, why are you going to go at 3 o'clock in the afternoon unless you're just like this big alcoholic, So it's like you're going to go to the bar at 10, 11 o'clock and you're going to start jamming to the music. But, that's like openers, like opening acts and stuff like that. Like a lot of people don't see the opening acts because they're like, I don't really care about this person. I want to see George Strait. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm going to go at 8 for an hour before he gets there, so we know we can get our seats and everything like that. So I understand that completely.
Well, my favorite one too is you play 3 hours and then people finally get there. They finally realize there's music going on, and they're like, "Man, you're gonna stop now? Like we want to hear this and hear that." I'm like, "Man, I've been up here for 3 hours." But luckily that's changing, and I'm looking forward to. I'm really kind of out of road shape. I think I got pretty good at going to sleep at 2 or 3 in the morning, hitting the road the next day, and traveling a couple hours and playing another show and doing it for 3 nights in a row. But this weekend will be the first test in a long time.
Now you're used to going to bed whenever you want to, 8, 9 o'clock, get up at 6.
Play at 3, right? Yeah. But that's all right. At this point, I don't care what time it is, what stage it is. I just want to play.
When did your voice drop? You got a pretty deep voice. So like whenever you're around where you were like, oh, my voice is getting deeper and I'm sounding like a man. Otherwise, like me, I'm sounding like a 13-year-old still getting puberty now.
I don't know. I'm from the mountains of North Carolina, so my twang is pretty honest. But as far as the depth and everything, I think probably around 12, 13 years old, whenever everybody else does. And I didn't really sing growing up because I didn't think I could. And then when I got into the late high school years, early college, I kind of found my voice, and that's just how I talk.
Just how I talk. I went to a couple of therapists in speech because I'm from the deep South of Mississippi, and so it's like the I's were ah, and you never put the G on the end of a word. It was always I'm ending it instead of I'm ending it, and so I was like I'm going to sound more professional. So I'm going to go to this therapist and but you know what? I think that was a waste of money because it's like, I really don't care. I just wanted to sound more professional. And it's like, sometimes the accent comes out. Like if I'm talking to you, the accent will come out, and it's just, when you're talking to these Hollywood people from California or even from Florida, it's just, they look at you, and of course they're going to use that, you stupid redneck, you just asking me these stupid questions, who cares?
It is funny you say that because I've actually lost a lot of my accent being from the mountains of North Carolina. People have a way harsher, a bear is not a bear, it's a burr. Or you still have if you say rice or not, a burr. Yeah, I'm not twangy compared to where I'm from.
Wow.
But nobody here talks like this. So, but I think we realized really early in the studio that it wasn't going anywhere. But a lot of people were like, "Man, your twang is your ticket," and it's authentic. I can try to sing it another way, but it just doesn't work out right. So I figure I'm gonna be true to myself on that one. But yeah, it's somebody actually focused on that the other day in an interview. So I went to Clemson University, and I was pre-med going in. And the only reason I switched majors, I had the grades to go do orthodontics or whatever my interest was back then. But I'm just an outdoorsman. I want to be outside. That's really why I went to law enforcement, to be a game warden. But now I've got the best job in the world because on weekends I get to play country music for all my friends, and even really everybody that I play for becomes family. So you get to hang out at the coolest places, meet the coolest people, but then during the week I'm hunting and fishing.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm very appreciative of the job that I have because, I'm a young 23 and I feel like my life is just, if I don't make it by this time, I'm going to freak out, but I have a great job because I work with my dad, and it's like I can be off whenever I want to and do this podcast, because I'm making a little bit, but it's not enough to fully financially support me, like a lot of startups are.
Right.
But and it's just I'm very appreciative of what I go through, other than like what other people that struggle to really make it have went through, because I have it very easy and very normal than compared to a lot of others that are in the position that we both are now.
Right. Well, every story is different, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't worry about the whole you got to be somewhere by a certain age. I just turned 29, and I tell people all the time. I have people that come up to me, which is kind of strange. I'm just a normal guy, but people come up to me after shows, and they're in their early 20s, mid 20s, like, man, yeah, I wish I was doing what you're doing. I said, well, I've only been doing it for, a little under 3 years now, and COVID's cost us a year, so don't ever let that hold you back, for sure. And I've had 3 different careers in my 20s, so
Yeah.
I don't think there's really a Rolling Stone gathers no moss, is what I'm getting at.
So you got it in at 26. That's kind of late for any musician, really.
I mean, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, Sturgill didn't get into it. He was way on. So,
Well,
I think there's a lot to be said about the maturity in that.
Did he not get into it, or did he just like not make it until a certain age? Because I'm not very familiar with Sturgill Simpson that much.
Right, that's a good question. I know there's some early videos of him from probably 10 years ago or so, but I would say, it depends on how you look at it. And you're right, there are a lot of people that don't get that break until later on. But I honestly think it's just, if the time is right, you got to go for it. And what I didn't want to do was sit there at 36 and go, dang, I should have done that, back then. But there's really, our fan base, I think it's the perfect. Whenever we made the transition from or into full-time music, I think it was the perfect time. As I hang out with 21-year-olds that are playing the music in college and spreading it to all their friends, but then I also hang out with people who are well into. I always say my age group ranges from 18 to 80. So I think that's a lot to do with the traditional country sound as well.
And I'm glad you said traditional sounding and not real country sounding, because that's a really big pet peeve of mine. But what really interests me when you say that is, I figured that someone that grew up with a bluegrass playing preacher son, would be, 80s and the 90s are my country. You know what I mean? So what was that like growing up listening to, was it strictly bluegrass growing up and gospel? And
No, man, I listen to literally everything.
Yeah.
And I would say our sound's really a lot of 90s influence in there. I'm a huge 90s country fan.
Me too.
But I listened to a lot of rock growing up. My dad listens to a lot of bluegrass, but I still love bluegrass this day, but I can take about an hour of it before I've got to transition to something else. But I listen to everything from R&B to classic. I was a huge classic rock fan. Leonard Skinner was what made me fall in love with electric guitar. And then even now I listen to, you can catch me listening to anything from Five Finger Death Punch to Nora Jones. It goes all over the place for sure.
Who is that?
I would say that my sound has a lot of nice influence.
Who is that one artist that just captured your imagination into music?
That's so open-ended. As far as being a songwriter, or you mean like doing it professionally?
Both.
Okay. Honestly, and I hate using this. My producer really hates when I say this, but Eric Church was a real big influence on both of those, really. I'll just make that one simple. We're from the same area. I don't try to sound like him. It just comes out that way. But I remember watching him in 2010 at Clemson, actually. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's a heck of a show. That's cool. So that maybe start playing guitar a little more seriously. But even then I was doing it for fun. And then from a songwriting aspect too, I was already doing that a little bit. But that really depends on whoever I'm listening to at the time.
Why does your producer, and why do you hate saying that Eric Church was the biggest influencer?
Because the last thing you want to do is for somebody to say, oh, well, he's a church clone kind of deal. I want to be known for our sound. I want people to be like, that's Andrew Bean. And I think we've done a great job doing that. But when it comes to playing in bars, I used to play a lot of, I could cover the heck out of them. And we still do a little bit. People still request it. But I just don't want to fall into that kind of, people said the same thing about Sturgill and Waylon,
Right.
And it kind of got on his nerves, which I think that's a huge compliment. So, I mean, I take the church thing as a huge compliment. I just, at the end of the day, I want it to be Andrew Bing, and no confusing that.
But can't you say your biggest influencer is Eric Church and not try to be like Eric Church? Like, because obviously you're not trying to be like Eric Church. You're just like, I listen to that guy for inspiration because that's kind of how you don't want your career to go that way, whatever, but you want the realness factor of Eric Church. You want the fact that you don't care what you put out, kind of like a Chris Stapleton. Chris Stapleton's the same way. Like, he doesn't care what gets put to radio. He doesn't care what gets put on the album. It just matters what the song is and how important it is to him. So I think, like you said, that's an open-ended question, because sure, you could say Eric Church is your biggest influence or not sound like him, but then you have idiots in the world that are like, his influence is Eric Church, and oh my God, he's trying to sound like him, which I've obviously been in the music industry doing this and the entertainment industry doing this. So I understand when you say, you don't really sound like it, because I'm trying to, I have podcast influencers or radio influencers. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do the Howard Stern show on the podcast. It's, I don't know. I'm going to go on forever.
Yeah, but I mean, but you know what I mean, though. It's when I listen to so many people there. It's just a melting pot of everything. And then a lot of it, but comes from, I was born in Statesville, North Carolina, moved to the mountains. So even a lot of the influences, like songs he covers on like 61 Days in Church, kills me because I play half those in our live set. And I didn't even know that. And it's like when it comes out, it's not unheard of for that to happen, though, because if you take blues singers from the Delta, a lot of them are going to have the same sound, styles, influences, even though they have no idea who each other are. So I think there's a lot of truth to be said in that, too.
So how many, give me a rough estimated guess here, which would be, how many cover songs do you think you perform on, just use one set? Don't use, you do foreign sets, but one set, how many cover songs do you think you do?
In our lineup right now, I would say, I mean, it's a 2-hour show that we have full band.
Okay.
And it's very easy 50-50. 50% covers, 50% originals. And the only reason for that, and we take those covers too and twist them to our own. Because you've got to play songs people can get into, that people know, but it's really cool how quickly everything is becoming more and more original, if that makes sense. Now, if we open up for somebody, it's pretty much all original. But then if I'm doing something in the bar somewhere, 2 or 3 hour show, I can, not as much so now because we've gotten into more bigger shows before COVID hit. But I mean, you got to do what you got to do. But I would say I try to stick to as many originals as possible.
But I like your answer that you try to keep it 50-50, because there are people that will come on the show, believe it or not, Andrew, and be like, I don't sing covers at all. Covers are stupid. That doesn't show who I am. But I think that's kind of a big ego problem for a lot of people, because it's like, you look at Garth Brooks, you look at anybody from the 90s, 2000s, even today that are big stars, they will perform covers all day long. And it's like, if they don't have a problem with it, why should you have a problem with it? Just because if you're singing a song that you wrote called Butterfly Moonlight, no one's really going to honestly be paying attention. But if you're singing Friends in Low Places or Check Yes or No, stuff like that, then maybe somebody will listen, and then after that perform an original. That I honestly think, and I'm not a musician, think that's probably the more legitimate way to go about it.
Well, and it also too depends on what show it is.
Right.
If it is a showcase show, it depends on the time slot. I mean, it's unless you are a national headline act, it's got 4 albums out there. It's hard to play all originals.
Right.
But I also think that people saying that doesn't show who they are, I kind of call them out on that as well, because our covers, I'm not picking Friends in Low Places because I don't want to play something that's known. I played so many times, starting out, but we pick choice covers is the best thing. It might even be a deep track somewhere. There's somebody
an album track that nobody knows.
Right, that's an old John Anderson song or something like that. So, but yeah, obviously we want to showcase our stuff. And then when things get back rocking and rolling like they would have been last year, then all the original stuff will take off to where they immediately recognize what you're playing, which is already happening.
Really, do you see it happening more so than it was? Like, has the pandemic made your streaming more or less interactive?
Definitely less on that,
Okay.
just because being old school in our tactics, if you will, as far as growing the brand goes. I should have jumped on social media earlier, but even to this day, I can't stand social media. The way I grow my following is organic, boots on the ground, shaking hands, and playing to people. And that's the common. It doesn't matter if it's 1960 or 2021. You can't defeat that. I mean, word of mouth is really how, in my opinion, you establish your best credibility. Now, there's tons of people out there that pay for advertisement or pay for followers and do all this, or pay for streaming, or they get on certain playlists to get in algorithms. And I wish we had that, but at the end of the day, the way we were doing it was working, and that will come with it. But I would say that not being on stage definitely has hurt streaming. And then too, you're competing with people who have full-time jobs, who have
Right.
big time backers financially that can afford to do that. And for me, I'd rather put my money elsewhere, whether it's a music video or the studio, to produce something that's great. And then when things come back around, we're on stage, rock and rolling, and the rest will happen.
You have a new album coming out, which is your debut album, which is out April 16th.
Right.
When talk to me about the making of this album and kind of how it came about. Because have you put out an EP before, or has it just been strictly singles?
Strictly singles. So yeah, a lot of people ask what the theme of the album is, and there is not a themed album. There's no theme, other than the fact that it's just a
Right.
collection of songs that we thought everybody would feel. So it started out with, like you said, a couple singles, and it just kept on rolling. And my producer and I, Joe Taylor, started writing together more. And we're like, man, we always we were going to do an EP, and then we're like, let's just do a full album. And it was going to drop last summer, but then obviously we pushed it because of the COVID thing. And then ended up putting another song on there too, so it worked out for the better. And I would imagine that when that hits as well, I mean, right now streams are already picking up and everything with all the interviews constantly coming out. So we got a big album drop show here in Charleston at the Windjammer. So I think once that hits, and I went old school with it as well, and we're actually pressing CDs. I don't even have a CD player at this point, but you know, but I think that our fan base really appreciates that. I mean, at least you have something in hand you can leave with.
What's the name of the album? Have you decided yet?
Selma by Sundown.
What was it now?
Selma by Sundown.
Selma by Sundown. Is that a song on the album, or is it just?
Yeah, so that's a song on the album that Joe wrote, and it's actually that single is coming out March 19th, so it'll be out here in a couple weeks.
Why do you think people will name albums from a song title versus like what Keith Urban does, or sometimes Eric Church will put albums out and it's just like, name it a genuine, just a random title that pops in their head? Why do you think there's a difference in that? I mean, obviously besides label and, because obviously the label is going to push for an album title, but besides that, what do you think?
I think it just depends on the project, depends on the artist. Me personally, again, I don't really fall into what everybody else is doing, but
yeah,
that is my favorite song on the album, and I love that title. I wish I'd written it. It's one of the songs I did not write on the album, but when we were coming up with the title, it was between Country Ain't Dead, which is the first song on the album that I wrote, or Selma by Sundown. And I think that song just really describes what the album, if we had to come up with an overall theme, what it's about. And I love the sound of that song. So to me, it was a no-brainer.
Last couple of questions for you, and I'll let you go, which I'm appreciative of your time. These are something that I do every now and then, and it's called quick question, quick answer. And it's just kind of, I will say the first question that pops in my head, and you just give me the first answer that pops in your head.
All right.
So you have one album to listen to. You're dying on a train track. You're about to get run over by a train. You have 30 minutes to listen to one album. What album is it?
Adobe Sessions by Cody Jinks.
You've got one song. You're dying. I don't know what's up with this dying thing, which you're going to be dead in 4.5 minutes. What's that one song you're going to sing?
Redheaded Stranger by Willie Nelson.
Oh, my goodness, man. I am such a I'm such a Willie nerd that it's not even funny. What's one thing in your house, food-wise, that you have to have because you're just addicted to it? Or maybe wording it better, something that you have to have, you have to indulge in. You can't just have one.
Snack sticks, man.
What is a snack stick?
Snack stick is you eat deer.
Well, I haven't in a while, but yes, I do.
So a snack stick is basically like a beef jerky or like a Slim Jim stick that's just venison.
So are they home? Like, do you home make them or like can you buy them at a store?
No, your processor does it. So I deer hunt a lot.
Oh,
So every
okay.
time I process these snack sticks, and you make them jalapeno cheddar and everything. So I usually have those laying in my refrigerator. So anytime you come to my house, you can pretty much expect to eat wild game.
What's the best game you love to hunt?
Turkey season's right around the corner, and kind of a turkey fanatic. It's really whatever's in season, to be honest. Whenever deer season's here, I'm wide open in a tree stand, and then in between that, I'm fishing all the time. But I would say right now my mind's on turkeys.
Now, I grew up with a father or a dad that always hunted, always fished, always, it didn't matter what it was, he was going to hunt. Sun up, sun down, he was gone. And I never really got into it because I guess I just wasn't patient enough. And I love animals so much that it's just like, one time he was like, "You're going to go hunting with me." And I saw a deer and I actually shot underneath the deer on purpose and shot the log next to it. And then he was like, "You missed." I was like, oh, well, I get it next time, But, and so here comes a question that could be an actual stupid question, but it's a legitimate question that I have to you because it's going to be an open-ended question. What is the easiest game to hunt? Like if you're going to tell somebody, okay, they're like, "I want to start hunting." And you're like, "Well, to get your spirits up, let's go do this first because it's easier."
I mean, I'm trying to think. Honestly, I would, squirrel hunting is always a real good intro.
Because they're always there.
Well, and you can walk around the woods too. You're not necessarily sitting dead still like a turkey hunting.
Yeah.
Deer hunting's a whole, I mean, I could say deer hunt, if you want to shoot a doe with a rifle or something like that, it's good. But when you talk about hunting big bucks or bow hunting, that's a different story. But I think I got into hunting by squirrel hunting. I think most kids that grew up in the outdoors probably walked around with a 22 or a 20 gauge or something with their grandpa or their dad. So I would say squirrel's always a good intro to that. And you can eat that too. A lot of people, I don't eat squirrel a lot. But man, you can make a squirrel purple that'll blow your mind.
We had these neighbors one time. They had to be in their 60s, maybe early 70s, dude. And they're like, we brought you guys some dinner, and it would look like chicken and dumplings, right? Right. And we pulled out, there was a bone that looked like a rat. And they're like, "Did you like that squirrel and dumplings?" I'm like, "No, I didn't even eat it. I didn't even touch it. There's no way I'm going to eat that looks like a rat." No way, man.
Well, if it's done right, you never know what it was unless they told you. So
right. And I had done that one time. Somebody had told me, was like, "Man, this is good ribs." And it was actually a lamb chop or a pork chop. And I was like, "I'm eating a sheep. I know there's no way." I'm just weird like that. I grew up in the country, but I'm not country. So do you run upon that a lot? Like people that were born in the deep South and they're just like not country at all?
For sure.
Last couple of questions. And I know I've said that, but this is legitimate last couple of questions. What's the last thing that you've learned that just blew your mind?
I don't know about that blew my mind.
What's the last thing that you learned that you didn't know?
So I'm trying to think. Well, actually, this just popped in my head, but a thing came out on coyotes. So right now it's coyote breeding season, and I did not know that. I actually learned that this morning. So there's a little outdoor trivia for you. Apparently gestation periods around like 60 days for them. So I don't know if you got coyotes out that way.
Yeah, man.
And the reason I learned this is because my girlfriend's parents' neighborhood sent out an announcement. I got a kick out of that. So it was actually here in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. That was a notice for everybody who's walking around the neighborhood and pushing their kids around in strollers and everything to be on the lookout for coyotes. So that's probably the last interesting thing I learned.
What is the number one thing on your list that you're afraid of? Whether it be an animal, relationship, or whatever. But what's the number one that ranks your list?
Yeah, I'd probably say it sounds cliche, but I'd say failure. But at the same time, I don't want to say it's necessarily a fear. I think that's just a drive for anything. You know, it's you don't know if you can do something until you do it. So I'd say that's kind of a weird response, if that makes sense. But I think that's what keeps me going.
What's the most scaredest you've ever been? Scaredest, scared. I don't know the past tense of that, but what's the scaredest you ever been?
Oh, I don't know, man. I'd say I don't get scared, but I'd be lying to you. But as
You
far
would
as
be, and I would call you out.
yeah. I mean, I can tell you the last time I was scared is I got this. So I work out in the house now. I live kind of in the sticks, but I got this this punching bag deal. But it's called Bully Bob. It's a silhouette. If that makes sense. I don't know if you've seen them in sporting goods stores or not.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that thing's sitting outside. And so I forgot about it for like the first couple of days. I had it there at the house. So you walk around the corner, it'd give you a pretty good jump. You think somebody was standing outside. So yeah, I'd say startled more than scared a lot. Or if you're like vacuuming the house or something, you got headphones in, and somebody walks around the corner to tell you something, I about come out of my skin. But I kind of swing when that happens. So.
Is that a mullet you got, or is that just long hair tucked behind a hat?
Long hair.
Okay, cool. I was like, oh, you
long.
followed. I was like, you followed in the mullet factor there.
Well, I was actually going to bring the mullet back as well, along when everybody else did. And since everybody did it, it made me not want to do it. So I'm just going straight long.
Well, Andrew, look, I appreciate you coming on here for this 45-ish minutes that we've been on. I really do appreciate it. Coming from a small town, small podcast like me, I appreciate it. And for your time, go ahead and just plug anything you want, whatever you want to talk about. You got all the time you need.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having us on here or having me on here. I'm glad you got power back. Obviously, we tried to do this last week. But we got the first single dropped back in February. It's called You Should See the Other Guy. And we got a music video coming out for that. So be on the lookout for the music video. We got the second single coming out March 19th. It's called Salem by Sundown, which is the title track to the album that's dropping April 16th. So follow me on Instagram, Beam Country. That's Beam like the whiskey, country like the music. And stream the music under Andrew Beam everywhere on all digital platforms. I'm a big Spotify guy personally. But the album will be out April 16th, and we'll have a music video here directly.
Andrew, I appreciate it. You have a good rest of your day, brother. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for doing it.
Do the same. Take it easy.
All right, bye.